This video will explain the setup and operation of the Powermatic Tenoning Jig. It is very important to follow the initial setup instructions as detailed in the manual. The time spent on carefully completing the initial setup will reward you later with fast and accurate tenon cuts. Before starting, ensure that the miter slot is parallel to the blade, the saw blade runs true, there is no wobble or noticeable runout, and the saw blade 90-degree position is accurate. Place the jig on the table saw with the guide bar in the left miter slot. The guide bar should fit snugly in the miter slot without binding. Information on adjusting the guide bar to the miter slot is fully detailed in the product manual. With the table saw blade raised and set at exactly 90 degrees, loosen the jig fence lock knob and the jig fence locking lever. Slide the jig fence assembly so that it just contacts the blade. Make sure not to deflect the blade by pushing into it. Only light contact is required. Verify that the jig fence is parallel to the blade. The jig fence will have equal contact with the edges of the blade teeth at the front, center, and back of blade. With the jig fence still lightly contacting the blade, tighten the jig fence lock knob, making sure the jig fence doesn't shift while tightening the knob. Loosen the locking levers on both stops and slide both stops until they are firmly pressed against the jig fence handle. Tighten stop number 1, making sure the locking lever is securely tight. Now, stop number 1 is indexed at the 0 point with the blade and will need no further adjustment for this saw and blade combination. Now, the mortising chisel and workpiece will be used to configure the jig for cutting operations. Then, a test tenon will be cut to make sure the setup is correct. Loosen the jig fence lock knob and slide the jig fence forward out of the way. Place the chisel used for the mortise against stop number 1. Slide stop number 2 against the chisel with gentle pressure and lock the lever. When removing the chisel, there should be slight resistance. Press the prepared workpiece against stop number 2 and bring the jig fence handle against the workpiece. Tighten the jig fence lock knob. When removing the workpiece, there should be slight but not excessive resistance. The jig is now ready for cutting operations. Set the work stop to the desired angle and adjust the saw blade to the desired height for the tenon. Place the workpiece, with the cheeks already cut, flush against the work stop and the jig fence. Press the toggle plates to slide the rear clamp jaw along the bar and rotate the clamp handle to tighten the clamp pad securely against the workpiece. Turn on the table saw. With both hands on the jig handles, slide the jig forward until workpiece has passed completely through the blade. Turn off the saw and allow the blade to stop, then slide the jig back. Do not pass the jig back over a moving saw blade. Turn the workpiece around and clamp in position. Then turn on the table saw and make the second cut. Then fit the tenon to the mortise. If the tenon does not fit the mortise as desired, the jig has a micro-adjust system to allow for fine corrections to the 0 point reference. Loosen the jig fence lock knob, the jig fence locking lever, and stop number 2. Bring stop number 2 and the jig fence handle back against stop number 1. Tighten only the jig fence locking lever, and then, holding both stops and the jig fence handle together, loosen stop number 1. If the test tenon was too loose, stop number 1 is too far back, making the jig fence too close to the blade. Turn the micro adjust knob counterclockwise, as viewed from the front of the jig. If the test tenon was too tight, stop number 1 is too far forward, making the jig fence too far from the blade. Turn the micro adjust knob clockwise, as viewed from the front of the jig. Once the placement of the jig fence has been adjusted, push both stops up against the jig fence handle and tighten stop number 1. Repeat the setup with the chisel and workpiece and cut another test tenon.
For the last 90 years, Powermatic has been setting the gold standard in woodworking machinery. Committed to quality since 1921, Powermatic has been providing generations of woodworkers with the tools and the confidence to create and inspire. It truly is the gold standard.